Hey everyone, Brandflix here, back with another Eternal Return video. This video is going to be pretty rambly, so I'm going to try my best to make sure the table of contents are all in order. This video might also be a bit longer than necessary, so again, table of contents will hopefully be on, correctly, but I think if you're not a mage player, it'll be a pretty short video because most of this video will be for mages. And so the reason why I say that is purely because mages have the most item diversity when it comes to upgrade items. So I'll try and make it like distinct between the mage upgrades and every other upgrade, just so you can skip there if you're not a mage player, just because again, I know that not everyone plays a mage. There are many ways to play the game, and I think there's builds to support all of those. It's just that mages have the most complexity purely because they have so many different slots that mimic the same thing, and because of that, it's important to know how you should combine those items within those different slots, if that makes sense. So enough rambling, mages are going to be the most long section, so let's get started with that right now. So mage weapons are very common in the fact that most of them provide either CDR or no CDR, which might be a pretty obvious conclusion until you realize that most like attack power or tank items don't really provide that duality, so their builds become a lot less complicated because of that. So we'll start with the high CDR items, or high CDR weapons, just because I'm most comfortable with those, mostly because I played Adina and Lad will love Adina, and she's an Arcana user. So what does Arcana want in upgrades? That's going to really depend on your base build. Usually most Arcana builds will have only one CDR piece, so like for example, you'll either have High Priest robes, or you'll have Virginet / Crown, or you'll have Virginet. I mean, is it Virginet? No, it's Tindalos band, my bad. I already said Virginet. So you're either going to have one of these three CDR pieces on your chest, helmet, or arm, and that's really going to determine how you're going to want to create your CDR item and the rest of your transitions around that, just because CDR is so valuable on these high CDR weapon casters. There are very few casters that have CDR on their weapons that don't want to be at, right below, or even exceeding the CDR cap, if that makes sense. So if you're going something like High Priest robes, then most likely your item upgrade is going to be Mithril Dress, because that directly overlaps onto where your High Priest Rose was. And so if you're going Mithril Dress, then your helmet is most likely going to be Persona, because that's the by far best pure damage upgrade for a helmet. And then your arm piece can be a Scotty or a Dragon Scale. The boots on all of these will be pretty much the same. It's going to be very interchangeable between Mithril boots and red shoes if you have a high CDR weapon, so just keep that in mind. I'm not going to explain the boots too much. So if you're going to go Virginet or Crown, then most likely your CDR upgrade is going to be either Sultan, or you're going to upgrade your other items around it, just because Crown already gives so much CDR to begin with. So if you're going Crown specifically, then you most likely won't upgrade your headpiece until very late into the game, just because, first of all, Sultan is very annoying to upgrade if you have Crown, because of how many items that are required. I would say you only upgrade it to Sultan if you somehow find a random Virginet on the ground on a corpse. Or, again, you just never upgrade your crown because that's by far the least, I guess, important upgrade out of all of them. If you're going Tindalos band, then you'll have a bit more complicated of a setup or decision to make between your chest piece and your headpiece, just because you won't have that easy decision to say, oh, I'm not going to bother upgrading my headpiece because it's just a crown that's super efficient, or oh, I'm going to make a Mithril Dress to count my CDR because I already have a High Priest robes there. You're probably going to be looking at something a bit more tanky. I would say, ironically enough, that if you're going an arm piece and you're choosing to go Tindalos band, you're most likely playing a Bruiser-esque mage, because that way you can go Holy Orders, which gives a lot of HP and defense, along with something like the astronaut helmet or the upgraded motorcycle helmet, which also give a lot of HP and defense. Just because you don't really want to stack on a Sultan in that aspect, because you're going to be overcapping your CDR by like 20, and since you're going to be a Bruiser-esque mage, you don't want Sultan again because the stats on it are very poor for tanking. So I would really recommend you only go Mithril Tindalos on melee characters that have high CDR weapons, which is probably just Bat and Dagger. But even Dagger probably doesn't even need the Mithril Tindalos because they just want more damage. So again, it's very complicated to figure out, and I'm trying my best to like give you the best option here, but it's again very complex. This season has pretty much just started, so I'm also kind of lost on a few of these things. But just keep these, again, these builds I'm showing on screen are going to be the ones that I recommend personally. If you find a better loadout that you think you have, then go ahead and use it, please, because I do not think enough about the game to get everything out of there. So to move on, let's talk about the weapons with no CDR. So a lot of these weapons would be stuff like, Shuriken, a lot of throw weapons don't have that much CDR. I think like a lot of bat weapons don't have CDR either, or rather magic sticks. So these are weapons that you're going to have to build multiple CDR pieces if you want to hit that cap. And it's ironically a bit easier to wrap your head around this one, just because it does, again, there are so many mage pieces that are so good that have CDR that it ends up being more convenient to just pick and choose what you want. So let's say that I'm running Death Rune. Death Rune has a lot of amp, but no CDR. So what am I going to build with Death Rune? If I'm going High Priest robes and crown, then very obviously I could just go a Mithril dress and glacial shoes. And that would solve my problems, because if I go Mithril dress, then I'm just replacing High Priest robes. I can get a Holy Orders, or rather I can get a persona for my helmet, and then I can just have a glacial shoes floating there. I might be overcapped by like 10-15% for a bit of the game, but honestly, if you're going a pure damage weapon, you don't care about overcapping CDR just because your damage is already going to be high from the weapon itself. So another option you can go for is going to be Sultan and Mithril Tindalos if you have a 0 CD weapon. This is going to be a much nicer round out of your CDR, because it adds up to, I think, perfectly 35% CDR, so it's a very efficient use of your stats. And then if you're going Tindalos and Glacial Shoes, you can then fit on stuff like Holy Orders and like an Astronaut Helmet, or maybe going Cabana and Persona, which will give you a lot of damage if you really want that. But obviously, Dragon Scale gives you the most damage, so what if you're going Dragon Scale and you still want to cap your CDR? Then you're probably going, again, the same old like Mithril Dress and Glacial Shoes, just because that's the most flexible option you can have. Then there's also the option of just going pure damage, which is a lot easier just because there's only so many no CDR pure damage items that exist for mages. So it's really going to be Cabana, Persona, Dragon Scale, and whatever boots you find. Probably Glacial Shoes, honestly, because again, a lot of mages want CDR, so going very low CDR is kind of griefing yourself, but it's really up to you. Again, you just never want to mix too many CDR items together, and you want to have either Holy Orders or Persona on your build. I would say that if this is too much, I'll leave a TLDR here. That TLDR is going to be essentially, for your arm piece, you can decide between damage, utility, or CDR. Damage is going to be Dragon Scale, utility, and still a lot of damage is going to be Scotty, and CDR is going to be Tindalos. If you go damage or utility, then your chest piece or your head piece are going to be your CDR cap items, and that's either going to be Mithril Dress or it's going to be Crown / Sultan. If you have a CDR weapon, then just choose one. If you don't have a CDR weapon and you want to cap CDR, then choose two. And then if you're going Mithril Tindalos, then Glacial Shoes will be easily enough to cap your CDR out, and so don't worry about what your chest piece and head piece are. If you're going Mithril Tindalos plus Glacial Shoes, you can really just do whatever you want from that. So hopefully that ramble was somewhat informative for all of you mage players. Again, I should probably script my videos out a bit better, but there's so much to talk about and so little time in the day, so hopefully this will be somewhat satisfactory for you guys. So with all that said, let's finally move on out of Mage and get to the other classes in the game. So first of all, let's talk about auto attackers. Right now, the auto attacker path is pretty streamlined. I believe that Omerta is by far the best chess piece if you're going for auto attackers of any kind, just because it gives a lot of armor penetration and crit. Shooting Star Jacket is kind of bad because it's very squishy. The stats are pretty good, but since you're not really getting much out of it besides the super efficient healing reduction, it's kind of grief on range auto attackers. It's a little bit better on melee auto attackers, but melee auto attackers have this issue where they're really squishy, so you want like a tankier chest piece, which would be Omerta, which would be like Mithril Armor, which would be like Guardian Suit. So Shooting Star Jacket, stat-wise, is extremely efficient, but gameplay-wise, it's kind of hard to fit in just because a lot of its stats aren't as optimal on a lot of characters. So again, your highest value chest piece will be Omerta. There is going to be like Elegant Dress, which is I think like the attack speed one, but I think that one's a little bit less efficient because you can use that meteor on your weapon, or you can use it on making a Force Core for Omerta. So if you're going for like a poverty auto attack build, then Elegant Gown will probably be good enough, or whatever that attack speed chest piece is. I'll just put it on the screen because I can't remember any of the new item names because I don't use them very often. So all that aside, if you're going a crit auto attacker, your BIS is probably going to look something like this: Omerta, Tag Visor or Cowboy Hat, Radar, and then Bucephalus, I think, or like Red Shoes Mental Boots will probably be good. And the reason why it's a lot easier to talk about like crit auto attacker builds is because you're always going to have radar. You don't really want cube watch unless for some reason you scale a lot more off of on hit, which doesn't exist, I believe, in the meta auto attacker builds. So radar will fulfill your crit. Boost selfless is always going to be good as a round out because you're probably going to be building. Actually, is it even called boost selfless? It's whatever the boost selfless upgrade is for crit boots. And so that's going to round out your crit very well. Omerta, obviously, a very strong headpiece. Laurel is going to be probably your best headpiece because, again, a lot of armor pen, and the Crystal Pegasus is really trash, so you don't want that at all. And then Visor is fine, but again, Laurel gives you a lot of flat AD and armor penetration, which you really need as a crit auto attacker because of how, you know, multiplicative values from crit and auto attacks work. So very easy on that front. I will just link like a pure attack speed build if you really want it. I haven't labbed it, but it just seems to be the best options you have, just because again, if you want to attack fast, you want really high attack speed, and you want a lot of on hits, so that's going to be probably the loadout you're looking at. Moving on from, before we move on actually, melee auto attackers and ranged auto attackers will very often have the exact same loadout. Just be aware that you're going to be running at least one tank slot, most likely on your chest. So Omerta, again, is going to be either Mythril chest or Guardian suit, depending on whether you want that cooldown reduction or just more tank stats. So just keep that in mind as we go on forward. So next we're going to be talking about Bruisers and kind of the split between melee auto attack Bruisers versus like caster-esque Bruisers. So I guess the best examples of this would be stuff like Felix versus characters like Dylan and Debbie Marlene. So I guess Debbie Marlene is kind of a weird one because she is technically an auto attacker, but since her kit has a lot of like pseudo auto attacks baked in, she's kind of both. Anyways, let's just ignore that. So if you're an auto attacking Bruiser, you're gonna be looking at building stuff with like Visor at least just to get a bit of attack speed, and maybe Cowboy Hat just to get a bit of attack speed to make your auto attacks more smooth. It also opens you up to having Mythril boots, which again give a lot of attack speed, so if you want to have that flexibility with your auto attacks and you're a melee and you want to be very tanky, then you're going to be running stuff like Guardian Suit, Mythril Armor, maybe Mythril Shield, and if you're feeling very rich, maybe Auto Arms. And then your weapons obviously just going to be anything that fits Smolder weapons like the Lance, Glove, and I believe Spear. No, I already said that. Sword. All of those are going to be very flexible because you're going to get a lot of damage for free despite being a tank. And if you're going to be a caster, it's going to be the very same idea, except instead of Cowboy Hat, you're probably going to be going like Astronaut Helm. And instead of like Auto Arms or Mythril Shield, you're probably going something like Scotty or Dragon Scale just for more damage, because there's not really a good mage arm piece that's also very tanky. Most of those are reserved for the like more attack power focused characters, but it's not a big deal just because a lot of mage bruiser tanks have a lot of mitigation in their kit already, so it's not that big of a downside to be going mage bruiser in this current era of Eternal Return. So the final class we're going to talk about is going to be the AD casters. AD casters are extremely simplistic in build path because they don't really get many sources of CDR. So there's like Laurel Wreath and this like Chain of Thorns, I think it's called. I haven't really used it that often. But besides those two specific items, I don't think there's any transitionals for AD specifically that give a lot of CDR. So if you're an AD caster that has a lot of CDR on their weapon, then you're really only going to be looking for Laurel Wreath for CDR cap. But if your weapon has no CDR on it, then you're probably looking at Laurel Wreath plus Chain of Thorns if you really do value that rotation aspect instead of that one-shot aspect. So this is again where I bring up Shooting Star Jacket. If you're an AD caster, you're most likely going to try and one-shot somebody, in which case the pure lack of defensive value on Shooting Star Jacket matters way less. So if you're like playing Daniel, for example, Shooting Star Jacket, while not the best choice because you'd rather have Omerta for a bit more damage and armor pen, it won't be too terrible for a fast upgrade if you're feeling a bit poor. And then I think Halo kind of deserves a special mention here because Halo used to be very good and efficient, but they've nerfed a lot since, so that's like a bit weaker now. They nerfed it by lowering its biotic proc from 3 seconds to 2 seconds, which doesn't seem that great, or which doesn't seem that large rather. But when you realize it's like a 50% increase in the cooldown, you'll understand that it's a lot less effective overall, and Laurel Wreath is not only still also very good, but it's much cheaper because it only costs a tree instead of a force core. And then the arm items rather you're really only looking at auto arms versus Chain of Thorns. There is some argument to be made that you don't even need to upgrade off of your arm piece if you have a Shahjaha, just because the difference is pretty low for a Force Core. Shahjaha gives you like 41 attack power as is, and then auto arms and Chain of Thorns gives you like about the same, if just not a little bit more in some other stats. So arm pieces can be upgraded last if you're an AD caster, but otherwise you're mostly looking for your weapon, you're looking for your headpiece, and you're probably looking for red shoes as the best upgrade over Maverick runners. Mavericks are like just so good because they give so many flat AP stats. I don't even know if there's like a good AP flat stacker boot that exists, just because the blade boots that are like the upgrade to White Rhinos don't give that much AD. Hermes are fine, but Hermes are like mostly a tank item if you're trying to be a bruiser. So really you only have red shoes, as far as I'm aware, for a good AD caster foot piece, which is super, super expensive. So if you're playing AD caster, your build's always gonna be super expensive, but just note that chest piece and head and weapon are your 3 most important upgrades, and then the other 2 are like very luxury based. So yeah, I think that was it, and I hope that was helpful. I know that I rambled a lot about mages and probably not so much for the other 2, but again, it's purely because most of the classes are very simplistic because they have so few options, whereas mages just have infinite options. And that's not to talk about balance or how like the game is made, just because I think a lot of classes are played, like they can be played fine, and having more options doesn't necessarily mean your class is stronger. It just means it's more confusing if you're trying to learn the game, so obviously very annoying. But yeah, hopefully this video was very helpful for you guys. Let me know if you'd appreciate more ramble-esque videos like this. I can try and make them, but since again I don't script my videos very well, they'll probably all just be like this, as messy. But yeah, hope you guys all have a good day or night, and I hope to see you again next time. Bye bye.